These were not people who bragged about this in subsequent years. There were just some extraordinary things. I mean, Tony King never told this story to his wife, who was married for 42 years. She knew nothing about it.
You know, Danny Keys said one time, he said, you know, if we won the championship, it'd be forgotten. But he said, because we had a black pitcher, and they wouldn't let us play, they'll talk about this for years to come. He was right.
I live in the neighborhood of Springfield that is called Forest Park, and there is this large park pretty much adjacent to my house. And by the baseball field, there is this monument.
Carved in that stone are the members of the 1934 Springfield, Massachusetts American Legion Post-21 baseball team. The starting lineup comprised of Joe Kelly, Captain Tony King, Bobby Triggs, Ernest Bunny Taliaferro, John Coffey, Fran Luce, Walter Lawler, Elmo Kaiser Lombardi, Coach Babe Steer, Ray O'Shea, and manager Sid Harris. The players were only 16 years of age. West Springfield native Vic Raschi, whom would become the pitcher for the New York Yankees and responsible for allowing Hank Aaron's first major league home run, was cut from the team during tryouts. The American Legion is a wartime veterans organization founded in 1919 by 3 officers of the American Expeditionary Forces. The Legion was responsible for the drafting and passing of the Servicemen's Readjustment Act of 1944, better known as the GI Bill. 1925 would see the creation of American Legion Youth Baseball, with the intent to coach young adults in the importance of sportsmanship, good health, active citizenship, and the promotion of equality by making teams of young adults with dissimilar backgrounds. The first Legion World Series would take place in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 1926. The following year would not see an American Legion World Series, as the organization financially overextended themselves, holding a national convention in Paris. With the Legion baseball program desperate to stay afloat, Legionaries sought a beneficiary and found one in Major League Baseball, with an annual pledge of $50,000. 6 years later in 1933, the league would find itself in a slump yet again, as their beneficiary withdrew their support due to the economic issues from the Great Depression. While not for the organization as a whole, 1934 proved to be an auspicious year for the local chapter Post-21.
In the summer of 1934, and in terms of, context, we're right in the midst of the Depression. Baseball is the game that is at the center of the American sporting stage. Yes, there was such a thing as football and basketball and hockey, but those sports were really secondary. Baseball was the game. It was unquestionably America's national pastime then.
You get 2,000 or 3,000 people up at Forest Park because nobody had any money, It was the only team in Springfield. I lived in West Springfield. In them days, you could take from different towns. And when I played, there was only 4 Legion teams around. Chicopee had 2. I think Westfield or Holyoke and Springfield had 1.
So kids growing up in a place like Springfield, Massachusetts, that was the game to play. And it was a local pursuit, but this was a particularly good team in 1934. A number of excellent players. One of those players was Bunny Taliaferro, an African-American player, reportedly very popular with his teammates and an astonishingly good athlete. And a number of other good players. Tony King, the one surviving member of that team, was quite an excellent player, and I can say that with some authority, having read through some of the clips from that time. And this team had a great deal of success and went on one, success regionally, and then, won a state championship and then a New England championship.
And they were invited to travel to Gastonia, North Carolina, to participate in a regional tournament.
The Eastern Sectional Tournament, they called it, at Gastonia, North Carolina.
If they won the tournament, they would go on to Chicago and they would participate in a national tournament for the national championship.
By way of context, I think it's important to understand that many of these kids had never left Massachusetts. There was almost no money here. This was, as I said, right in the midst of the Depression. And so this was a monumental deal as they get on this train to go down to North Carolina for this tournament.
We never had any money or anything. We never traveled. So we ate in a restaurant. It was the first time a lot of us ever ate in a restaurant, you know?
In 1932, Post 21 went to the National and lost in the last game of the World Series. So Legion baseball at Post 21 was very big at that time.
On August 21st, 1934, American Legion Post 21 left from Union Station in Springfield, Massachusetts at 1 p.m. They would arrive in Gastonia, North Carolina at 10:10 the following morning. Promises of royal treatment were made. The teams would be given free access to bowling alleys, theaters, and swimming pools. Extra bleachers had been set up, as the crowd expected to reach 10,000 attendees. There was to be an opening day parade, flag ceremonies before each game, and a banquet.
Things could have gotten really dicey. Not just the fact that, oh, you're not going to get to play a baseball game. There are a lot of people, as you know, who were just virulent about being able to have folk be together and play together.
Bus drivers, they had some trouble with them. They didn't want to take us.
When they arrived at the hotel, the manager told them that there was room for all of the players on the team, but there'd be no room for Bunny. Arrangements would be made with the local, what they referred to then as the local Negro doctor, and he would stay with them while the players stayed in the hotel. The coach of the team, Babe Steer, told the hotel manager that Bunny was a member of the team, and where the team goes, Bunny goes, to which the manager replied, not in North Carolina, he don't.
And you might be, say, a baseball player who was born in Alabama. You understood segregation in your place, so to speak. And you understood where to go, where not to go, how to behave, or to avoid problems. And then come up north and think things are more progressive, and then you might run into some folks who aren't very open-minded. So you just had to be hyper-aware of your surroundings.
Things were so different in them days. Christ, I took a walk down the street while we were there. These two colored guys are walking towards me. They had to jump out in the road. They couldn't pass me on the sidewalk.
On the day of their arrival, Post 21 was scheduled for warm-ups that afternoon.
When they arrived at the ballpark, word had spread quickly that the team from Massachusetts had shown up with a black player.
When Taliaferro came to bat, they said, the jeering increased. Even when the boy laced 5 straight pitches in batting practice against a distant left field fence, the fans in the stand booed the boy and his teammates. Gastonia Gazette, August 27, 1934.
You know, I was told a long time ago, California used to tell me, the guy gentleman I told you about earlier, he said, the things don't react to what the fans say, because if you acknowledge a fan, they got your attention and they're going to stay on you. He said, you hear it and don't hear it and go play your game. Play the game that you came out here to do. So that's what I would do. And you hear it and you don't hear it, and keep moving.
The first baseman on the team, Franny Luce, said they were walking down the street outside the hotel on their way back from that batting practice. And he said somebody came up behind him and told him that if you don't leave town, you're going to get what the black guy's going to get.
The competing teams from Tampa, Florida and Cumberland, Maryland refused to take the field if Bunny played. Cumberland would later claim that was a falsehood.
Well, it was a lot of name calling. I mean, I had a lot of name calling right here in my own home ballpark, you know, because I don't think Gastonia was ready for it, you know, back in the 60s.
Somebody called up, wanted to see the manager in the alley downstairs. So that was enough. We left.
Later in the evening, Legionnaire Chuck Wilson, assistant director of the National Americanism Division, halted the banquet and condemned the treatment of post-21. A mere 8 hours after Post-21's arrival in Gastonia, and attempting not to arouse suspicion, the team left quietly at 6:30 p.m., while the locals and competing teams were attending the welcoming banquet. Chuck Wilson had arranged for automobiles to meet the team at the hotel. Coach Steer would not tell the team that they were headed home for Springfield until they were a few miles from the Charlotte train station. When asked by a reporter about the team's response to the news, Post-21 said, "We can take it. You bet we can take it. And we will continue to stick with Taliaferro through thick and thin." Later in the evening, Legionnaire Chuck Wilson, Assistant Director of the National Americanism Division, halted the banquet and condemned the treatment of Post-21. Under the headline Old John Barleycorn in the local Southern paper, they called the outburst unnecessary and blamed it on liquor. Quote, "When Old Corn liquor causes a good fellow to make a fool of himself before his best friends and companions."
The trouble might have been avoided if the visitors had conformed to the customs of their hosts. When Southerners visit in the New England states, they submit to many things in connection with the Negro problem that does not please them, but they go ahead and adjust themselves and conform to the habit and customs of New England. Gastonia Gazette, op-ed, August 24th, 1934.
It still took a very long time for teams to be able to navigate traveling with African-American players. Jackie Robinson and the Dodgers had many difficulties in many communities when it came to being able to play. But at the same time, it's a social issue, but it's also an economic issue. And when players and teams ran into problems in different hotels and things like that, it was up to the team to be demonstrative in what they wanted for their player. This player is a part of our team. We need to have these accommodations, or else we're going to take our business elsewhere. Players like Robinson ran into all kinds of issues in places like Philadelphia and St. Louis and travel, and that lasted for many years with other teams. I think what was really difficult was that, keep in mind that a lot of the major league teams did their spring training in warm weather places in the South, where not only were there the social issues and the social attitudes about race, some of that stuff was entrenched in community law. That created a whole nother level of stress when dealing with that.
Jackie Robinson had to put up with a lot of crap. He couldn't fight back. He got a lot of abuse. And, when I would go to games, people would call him names in the stands. You never sat in the right field, that's where the white people sat. So you kind of gathered where the black people were. And, the names, they would call him, he would throw bananas on the field, that kind of crap. But Larry Doby would spike people, and, if you threw at him, he didn't say anything. He just come into second base with the spikes up. In our view, he was the kind of anti-Jackie Robinson.
During a changeover in New York, the Post-21 team would take a break from the journey home and watch the New York Yankees defeat the Cleveland Indians 9-2 at Yankee Stadium.
When we got back to Union Station, there must have been about 700 or 800 people there.
As baseball was becoming more professional in the 1800s, and professional leagues were forming what would become the beginnings of Major League Baseball, individual black players got opportunities to play in those white leagues. Some were fair-skinned and could pass for white and play, but then others, like Moses Walker, played as a black man. And so a handful of others got to play in those major leagues, which were mostly white leagues, but racial attitudes and social mores of the time really prevented a whole lot of those players to come in any kind of wave. And by 1900, many of those players, like Walker, were kind of pushed out of those leagues. But there was never a written rule that said that they could not play. It was basically collusion that prevented players from being recruited or into those major league teams. All black teams, such as teams in and around the Philadelphia area, tried to join those professional organizations that included white baseball teams, but they were refused. So these all black teams, in order to play and make a living at baseball, they just decided to do the best that they could. They traveled around the country. Not enough of them to create their own leagues per se. And when I mean, I want to make the distinction of creating a league means you're going to agree to play common opponents on a schedule, maybe determine a champion at the end of a designated season. That was difficult to coalesce for black teams. So they just played where they could. They played all competition, black, white, or whatever, traveling around the country. But without that league structure, there was no stability. Teams could go out on the road, maybe have a set schedule of games against many opponents, all kinds of things that can happen. Maybe too much rain could wipe out a stretch of games, and you could disband on the road, having not made any money. But a schedule helps keep things coalesced.
You never thought about the fact that if Jackie Robinson is playing for the Dodgers and he's not playing for the Monarchs anymore, and if Larry Doby is playing for Cleveland, he's not playing for the Newark Eagles anymore. And so if everybody's playing for major league teams, well, who's playing in the Negro Leagues? And so you didn't have to go to the Negro Leagues to see the people you wanted to see because they were coming into the major leagues. And that ended up with the shift in your viewing. And then those teams died.
Cumberland would go on to win the Eastern Sectional Tournament in Gastonia. In attendance was Billy Laval, a scout for the Boston Red Sox. He would sign 4 members of the Cumberland team to Class B and C ball clubs. William E. Carter Post of the Boston American Legion, in conjunction with Springfield Post 21, protested to the national organization with hopes of sending their local team to the National Junior Championships in Chicago. An attempt to raise funds locally for the trip would fall short of its goal.
Circumstances have made it necessary for the Springfield Post of the American Legion to abandon the plan of taking its junior baseball team to Chicago and demanding a right to participate in the national playoff. In the second place, it has been difficult to get in touch with the national officials who would be in a position to render a decision as to whether Springfield could play or not. Commander William R. Connolly, Springfield Post 21.
Cumberland would go on to win the Junior World Series. Francis W. Zarodka, coach of the Cumberland team, had agreed to play Post 21 in Springfield after the Junior World Series. A telegram sent to Post 21 on the afternoon of August 31st canceled those plans.
Fort Cumberland refuses to allow its junior team to participate in ball game in Springfield. Russell Copeland, Cumberland Legion Commander.
Southern Legion officials said their boys had been on the road long enough, and their parents were anxious about their safety and wanted them back home. To no avail, the Springfield Legion offered Cumberland $1,000 to play.
You know, it didn't bother me. I wasn't there to please them. I was there to please my coaches and please the fans that came to see me play. And it was, it worked out. It worked out, and I just took it and kept going because, like I said, growing up in the South, I heard things at the ballpark that I'd hear in the street, so I just hear it and I don't hear it. It goes right over my head and I go out there and play.
In early September, the Springfield branch of the NAACP would invite the team to speak at their monthly meeting. That evening, the organization would adopt a resolution denouncing the Gastonia events. That we, the Springfield branch of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, denounce the actions of the Tampa and Cumberland baseball teams, the hotel management that refused Taliaferro accommodations, the spectators, and the citizens of Gastonia as unchristian, unpatriotic, un-American, unjust, and ungodly. We brand their actions as those of malice, prejudice, cowards, and bigots.
You know, I tell people I know exactly what Jackie Robinson went through. And I was at an earlier age, like in 1947. Bunny would probably had to go through just as much as Jackie Robinson, or even more. And when I came along, you know, I still had to go through it, but I don't think I went through as much as Jackie Robinson or Bunny did.
When asked about his decision to take Ernest Bunny Taliaferro south, Coach Steer responded,
Why shouldn't we have taken him? The Legion program draws no color line, and besides, Bunny had played all season with us. He practically pitched us into the championship. It would have been very unfair not to take him along, and I feel that we were entirely justified in doing so.
Sometimes it just takes people to be courageous in a situation like that. And if the young person and the young person's family were okay with making that attempt, there had to be a lot of trust in the coach to be able to say that we're going to try this and we're going to do this, and nothing's going to happen to you.
A month later, on the 25th of October, Miami, Florida hosted the American Legion National Convention. A resolution by the Americanism Committee was presented with the intent to eliminate issues, such as the one that arose in Gastonia. That in a state where regional or section or junior World Series tournaments are played, social regulations are long-established customs, shall at all times be observed by practicable, all contests be so arranged as to preclude customs, laws, and regulations outside the control of the American Legion. Only after what was described as considerable heated debate, the American Legion voted not to accept the resolution. In January of 1935, Coach Steer notified Post 21 he would not be returning. Clarence Babe Steer would continue to be involved with local sports, serving as the Western Massachusetts athletic officer. Allie Hood would be named the new coach, and Roger Doc Wynn as manager. But it would end there. There would be no Post 21 team that season, as a lack of funds prevented the local Post from sponsoring junior baseball. Dalton and Pittsfield would be the only two Western Massachusetts towns with American Legion teams. In the regional championships, Gastonia would play Spartanburg. In the grandstands of the game, a few fans of the Gastonia team caused such problems, it would bring security concerns to the Junior World Series. With an increased security presence, Gastonia Post 23 would go on to win the 1935 American Legion Junior World Series. Bunny would continue to play baseball and football for Springfield Technical High School. As quarterback for Springfield Tech, he was voted to the All-Star team in 1933, 1934, and 1935. Billy Wise, coach of the rival high school Cathedral, said Taliaferro was a fine passer, though his talent never was emphasized. The pass just wasn't the game. Angelo Bartelli, the quarterback for Cathedral, would go on to play for Notre Dame and win the Heisman Trophy in 1943. After high school, Bunny worked for Fisk Rubber Company and played for their Industrial Baseball League team. On November 19, 1967, Ernest Bunny Taliaferro passed away at the age of 50. The pallbearers were his Post 21 teammates.
Put 5 kids through college. I thought that was wonderful.
All the players and all the surviving players on the team, they show up to be the pallbearers. This is the first time that the family it begins to discover who Bunny was, what his life was like before they were born. His daughter Linda, I remember telling me them asking one another, "Who are all these white people? Why are they doing here? Where did they come from?" They found out when Judge Danny Keyes he gave the eulogy for the team. Judge Danny Keyes is the youngest lawyer ever appointed to the bench in the state of Massachusetts. He became a judge when he was 28 years old. He's also the fellow who wrote the words that are on the monument in Forest Park.
I think that there are a couple things that were at play here. That one is that this was a haunting and difficult memory that I think people were wanting to sort of leave in the rearview mirror. But I think it was also a generational thing, because these were Depression kids who worked their whole lives in factories. That's what Tony King did. That's what Bunny Taliaferro did. And they were not really shining the light on themselves. They wanted to shine it on others. And in that spirit, I believe the thing that Bunny Taliaferro, I never met him, but by all indications, I think the thing that of which he felt most proud was raising a family of 5 kids and sending them off to college. It's a real significant uplift and something I think very much in the spirit of bending the arc of the moral universe toward justice.
He and his wife, Sweets, agreed very early on in their relationship that they would not say anything to any of their children about his athletic accomplishments or anything that took place in Gastonia. And I've often wondered why. I mean, he had scrapbooks loaded with stories written about him.
Oh, all kids did in them days. You got your name in the paper, you cut it out and put it in the scrapbook. This was all forgotten until Dr. Murray and Billy Sullivan, an ex-mayor of Springfield, they thought the team should get some recognition, and they started a fund and put a monument up at Forest Park. And if it wasn't, because it was forgotten for about 80 years.
I think it's important to understand what was happening in African-American history at that time. You have this great movement of population that's happening, what historians have described as the Great Migration. Post-Civil War and into the Reconstruction period, African-Americans are moving from the plantation life. Some are still kind of stuck in rural areas working at sharecropping in order to kind of make a living, which is almost the same as slavery in some respects. It was pretty brutal work, but they're moving from these rural areas to urban areas in the South and in the Northeast and in the Midwest, and then also from the South up north, if you would, mostly to urban centers. And a lot of that concentration is happening very much in places like Chicago, St. Louis, and Kansas City. They're following jobs. They're following opportunities such as working for meatpacking plants and the railroads and all kinds of other industry that's growing in these cities. The Midwest in particular is booming with this influx of population. Places like Kansas City welcome thousands of new folk coming up. And then this begins this trickle over a number of decades of people coming or starting communities in these cities. And of course, would ultimately include schools, would include churches, would include other businesses that would serve the Black population, because they would get separated into enclaves, some might say even ghettos of places, because of racial restrictions that were happening throughout the country. But in that cultural mix, and baseball being still very popular in urban areas across the country, and baseball is popular among many immigrant groups in the United States, but especially in urban areas, African Americans picked up the game as well, and then they developed amateur and semi-professional teams, as well as what ultimately will become professional teams that developed the Negro Leagues.
We are honored today to have with us the 2 remaining members of the original Post-21 Legion team, the Honorable Judge Daniel M. Keyes and Mr. Tony King. And sports journalist and longtime Red Sox reporter, Mr. Gary Brown, from the Springfield Republican, who has kept this story alive for the past 7 decades.
Last year, when I went up to interview Tony King, it was at the Soldiers' Home in Holyoke. Tony, 97 years old, delightful, very much in his right mind, articulate, funny, and had this roommate with a great story as well, a guy by the name of Joe Soskovich. In a small room, these two men, 197, one a comparative spring chicken at 90, both with stories that connected the world of baseball and the fight against racial injustice. The story of Joe Soskovich is that he grew up in Holyoke, was quite a fine baseball player, so much so that he was signed by the Dodgers, then the Brooklyn Dodgers, and assigned in 1946 to a minor league team that they had in Canada. Baseball historians will tell you that 1946 was a very significant year for their organization in Canada because at their highest level minor league team in Montreal, a team called the Montreal Royals, they had a player by the name of Jackie Robinson, who had just been signed by the Dodgers and would famously break the color line in Major League Baseball in the next year in 1947. So I just found it extraordinary that these two gentlemen brought together very, very late in life would have this shared history, in a way, of baseball and the fight against racial injustice.